Hey guys, it's Mathwell here once again, and wouldn't you know it, I'm still making builds in the current Ritual League, and one that I was supposed to get around to for quite a while now is a Voidforge build, especially since Trinity is now in the game, and it is quite synergistic with Voidforge in that you basically put Trinity on any Voidforge build and it's definitely going to be working, since Voidforge will pick a random element to deal 300% of its damage to, and that means that you'll almost always be rotating between a couple of elements and getting full Trinity stacks up always. This time around I wanted to do Flickerstrike because it's a pretty good play style for a Voidforge where you want to one-shot things. I wanted to have a real viable Flickerstrike on the table, since for the most part Flickerstrike kind of tails off on boss fights a lot of the time, and there aren't too many good examples of a Flickerstrike out there, and it is a popular enough skill amongst people that they like to see a good working version of it. And this one is somewhat of a working version. I mean, it was a very nice map clearer. It's a Slayer version, so that you have a very large amount of base crit to start with. We've got the Overleech node, and then a bit of area, and also trying to utilize one of the new items from Maven, Arn's Anguish, and that is turning your endurance charges into brutal charges, which is also a good reason for taking Slayer, since we stack frenzies, and then our 8 max frenzies become 8 max brutal charges, and each brutal charge gives you 3% chance to deal triple damage, which means we have 24% chance to deal triple damage up at all times. And in total that should be something like a 48% increase to damage, I believe, and it's pretty noticeable. It's not terribly noticeable during pack clearing because you're probably one-shotting packs either way, but on boss fights, when you do have your brutal charges up, you'll definitely notice that sometimes there'll be a big spike that can just about kill most bosses. And if you don't have them up, the damage is pretty static, and it's noticeable that it's just, whittling them away nice and comfortably. But get those brutal charges up, and with the rate at which you attack with a Flickerstrike, it should be going off pretty frequently, and you'll see some big chunky hits. I'd say it's probably one of the better uses of this belt, doing something like a Slayer, so that you can stack frenzies and then the endurance charges. And to fix endurance charge generation, we essentially just get Enduring Cry and use a Warcry or Exerted sort of cluster jewel to give you minimum charge power through your Enduring Cry. So every time you're Enduring Cry, you should be getting 2 endurance charges up. But I've also got the Helm enchant that gives another endurance charge from Enduring Cry. So every time I Enduring Cry, I have 3 brutal charges going up, and they last 10 seconds. So it is a little bit annoying since they go down pretty quickly. So you just have to press your Enduring Cry every 5-6 seconds to keep it up nicely. But that's also working towards giving us good regen too. So as you can see, pretty damn good for map clear. Basically, this character did nothing but double beyond, triple beyond, and sextants and all that sort of shit, and we got to level 93, almost 94, quite quickly, quite smoothly, without many deaths at all. The deaths will be coming into play sometimes on certain boss fights. As you can see, with most regular boss fights, just your Conquerors and Guardians and shit, it's not really a problem. You just might need to build up a few frenzy charges at the start of the fight with your frenzy. Make sure you got your brutal stacks up, and then just go ham. It's the really big bosses like a Cirrus, possibly a Maven, didn't actually try it in the end yet, where when you have to attack and you get yourself into some pretty big trouble against the main attacks they have, since they don't die quite instantly. Like over here, you really can't justify flickering during this phase at all, but I did anyway, and it fucked me over. When I got a clean window of opportunity to actually DPS a Cirrus, well, yeah, it was good, clean fun. But there's going to be a few other boss fights, I imagine, that aren't terribly good for that, like the Uber fight, and I think Maven as well, but it should be fine with the right gameplay mechanics and stuff. But I didn't actually end up trying it since I didn't build up enough of a stack for Maven Rit just yet. I was trying to speedrun the end game while also harvest, craft, fine-tuning plenty of my gear, and at the same time playing a bit of Binding of Isaac in the later parts of the stream. That said, that's the character. Let me show you how I built it and what went into making it. Here's our character, level 93, Jesus Take the Forge. So, you know, usually Jesus take the wheel for a Flickerstrike, except this time it's a Voidforge, so take the Forge. And it is based around the Voidforge weapon. Made plenty of characters around these things. They are insane if you are unaware. Just stack a bit of flat physical damage so that you can overcome the low starting point, and then you've got a huge amount of extra weapon fizz as a random element, and it always hard carries. You deal nothing but elemental damage, so you can't use like Chaos, Atsiri Flask, stuff like that, and converting most of the base physical that you have does give you a good bit of extra damage overall. But the entire character's gear is pretty fine-tuned at this point. It's going to look kind of expensive and silly, and it kind of needed to for Flickerstrike, but at the same time, most of the stuff just starts out pretty simple, and then you went ahead and fine-tuned it through a harvest, which is what I did after finding a good few of them. So, for example, a chest, the part of the reason we could sustain some frenzies was the 10% chance to gain a frenzy charge on hit. That's mostly just for additional boss fight sustain, which doesn't seem too important in the end since we're killing them very quickly. And then the attack crit. So we started out with the attack crit and the frenzy. Awaken Orb smashed those two together, and then just rerolled prefixes over and over by keeping suffix craft and just rerolling prefix on the harvest until something happened, and then smashed 2 augment lives on that, and it worked out pretty well in the end. The way we sustain frenzy charges in general is through this chest, and as well as that, Flickerstrike itself has 20% chance to gain frenzy charge on hit, and then with multi-strike, obviously that's going to be 3 attacks per frenzy. And then you've also got Blood Rage going off for mapping, and that's the main source of sustain during your mapping, however. And then got a separate setup for Frenzy anyway, so usually we are jumping around like this. Leap Slam, faster attacks, Frenzy, and Fortify. And Frenzy is only really ever used for some big boss fights to get those stacks up quickly. And then for the really big boss fights, I get rid of Leap Slam since I'm only ever flame dashing around, and then occasionally slapping a frenzy on the enemy with inspiration as well, just to keep my inspiration stacks up. Other notable pieces of gear are the gloves and amulet. Just grabbed one with crit multi to start with, hit it with some shit, I don't even remember. Essences, I think, physical essences, and that's where we ended up. Maybe it was, yeah, I think it was physical essences. And that's where we ended up with a few little crafts. Obviously, same assassin mark ring as always. Pretty easy to cast or reroll those through the harvest. Same elusive boots that I've been using all league. And then these gloves were a bit of a challenge as well. So Awakener Orb, the Frenzy, and the additional strike together. Those are the important things on here, and nothing else really matters. It's just you want the additional target so you don't have to use Ancestral Call. You want the max Frenzy so that you can get as many frenzies as possible for Flickerstrike, and each frenzy will also give us an extra brutal charge, so it's pretty important. And then once again, had 3 prefixes and then just rerolled suffixes a bunch to clean things off, and eventually just had a augment chaos, augment attack again, and that's what happened. And it seems pretty nice overall. We don't need the melee strike range. We could even use a bit less accuracy if we wanted and fit in a precision, but this is what we got, so that's what we're working with. And the entire 2 items we're building around is Voidforge. As I mentioned, you build around it with Flat Fizz and all that, but the other thing is Arn's Anguish. So it basically converts any modifiers towards your endurance charges to go towards brutal charges, and brutal charges give you 3% chance to deal triple damage. So stack them up quite nicely. See, every time we Enduring Cry, we're already up to 6 brutal charges. 1 more and boom, 8 brutal charges. Pretty damn quick. And the setup there is just Anomalous Enduring Cry, just for Warcry speed, since we don't have instant Warcry, and then attached to Second Wind, so that you can have a second use of it and it cools down a little bit quicker. So that's the entire point of that. And then we've also got this medium cluster to get Lead by Example and Cry Wolf. The important one here being Cry Wolf, which gives us war cries have a minimum of 10 power. That means that Enduring Cry will always try to generate 2 endurance charges, but it can do more if you're next to a boss, something like that. Our actual large cluster here is just for Fuel the Fight, a bit of mana leech, and a bit of damage, since we are overleech, and then Sure-Footed for crit and double damage randomly as well. Otherwise, passive tree, basically just taking a few sword nodes and then all the frenzies and crit nodes and stuff. Pretty standard stuff. A little bit of early damage. We anointed this Ellie here for penetration, since we don't have that much of it. I was going to triple balance a Wise Oak, and it would have been about the same as a Bottled Faith, but just a little bit harder to do, so screw it, put on a Bottled Faith, and that gets us about the same damage, and it's pretty cheap at the moment. We take these nodes for conversion, since if you're not converting your base physical, you're just straight up losing it as damage. Not the biggest deal, since most of our damage comes from that 300% extra, but if you're going to miss out on 100% of your base fizz, it's kind of annoying, right? So you got 300% extra, but you're missing out on 100, so it's like a quarter of your damage. So then we've also got the conversion to Hatred, to Cold from Hatred, Watcher's Eye. And then a few just crit multi type of jewels. Couple of just life-based small clusters as well. And our actual ascendancy, as I mentioned, we got the base crit, since Voidforge starts out with garbage crit. We've got just a bit of melee range and damage and stuff. The overleech nodes and 10 reduced damage taken while leeching helps to counteract Abyssus a bit. And then this one, which gives us another max frenzy. What a nerd, 30,000, congrats. And the max endurance charges. So we are, of course, running an Abyssus. I don't think we really have to in this build, in this version of the build, but definitely too nice to go past for a Voidforge. One of those that just really synergizes well, since we start out with such low fizz to start with. Running Mark of the Elder combined with the Coral Ring, and that's pretty much all of the damage that we ever need in the build. The actual main links are Flickerstrike, Close Combat, Multi-Strike, Awaken Melee Splash most of the time, and then subbing in Ellie damage for a single target, Trinity, and Inspiration pretty much all of the time, since it does get fairly heavy on mana cost without Inspiration, and I was maintaining that most of the time, 61 mana. That's why I have so much unreserved mana, just so I can keep flickering around, but Inspiration does go a long way in the setup as well. And then we've got a double totem setup here, as always. Ancestral War Chief, multi-totem and protector, and then Ruthless, Hulling Strike, and melee fizz damage. Aside from that, Herald of Ash, Hatred, Enlighten, and Stone Golem. Herald of Ash doesn't add that much damage to the build, but it does add some nice sort of aesthetics and a little bit of extra clear. You could, of course, put in like Herald of Purity instead, a bit more damage. Maybe a Aspect of the Spider if you'd rather, just for a bit of defense, some shit like that. Ultimately, Voidforge is a weapon you can do just about anything with. Anything that you can two-hand attack with, Voidforge is going to be more or less best in slot. You can get better by all means, but it's going to be something like an 800 plus DPS weapon to overcome a Voidforge. And then of course it's also got good life, bit of extra area, so it's a very powerful weapon. But with Trinity, just a real easy, usable, huge support these days. With Voidforge, it's kind of hard to go by. So that's the build. Pretty expensive stuff. This is the new Imperial Sun support pack. I do want to show you an alternate sort of thing I played around with just randomly that I don't know, managed to come together with, and it was kind of a Kylo Ren cosplay for our character before this entire thing, this new supporter pack showed up, and it's not going to be something anyone can get these days. It's only if you actually have some of the correct items, or correct, rather, MTX from before, and that is the Subjugator weapon effect. So the thing we're looking for here is Nightfall, and whatever else doesn't matter at this point. But there's a real funky interaction with Nightfall and Subjugator that I'd never seen before, and only just now noticed for the first time. And it basically gives you a big fat red lightsaber. So our character, very nice little Sith Lord type thing, as you can see, with the cloak and the little setup. But we've got this fat lightsaber that does get bloomified to the tits. So this is with a little bit of bloom, with no bloom at all. You can see it's a nice clean sword. With maximum bloom, holy fucking shit, it's like 3 lightsabers stacked together. But anyway, that's just something I wanted to show you because I did play around with it and people asked for it a lot. And Subjugator with the Nightfall. But Subjugator is an old supporter pack, so I doubt too many people are going to have that one. In any case, Flickerstrike, Voidforge, Slayer. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and the build. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.